Single father sees his daughter playing with another identical girl and faints when he discovers that Thomas Wilson was watching his daughter Emily playing in the park when he felt his legs go weak. The 7-year-old was running across the playground hand in hand with another child who seemed to be her perfect reflection. That's when reality hit him like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just a casual resemblance. The two girls were absolutely identical in every detail. "Daddy, this is my new friend," Emily shouted, running toward him with a radiant smile. Thomas tried to respond, but the words refused to come out. His eyes fixed on the other girl, who wore denim overalls over a pink blouse and carried the same joyful expression as Emily. The same eye shape, the same way of smiling, even the same dimple on the left cheek. The world began to spin around him. His hands trembled, and a tingling sensation ran up his arms. Within seconds, darkness enveloped him, and he collapsed onto the wooden bench. "Oh my goodness, are you all right?" A woman's voice brought him back to consciousness. Thomas slowly opened his eyes, feeling his forehead throbbing. An elderly lady with grey hair was leaning over him, holding a damp handkerchief to his forehead. Behind her, the two girls watched with concern. "What happened?" he murmured, trying to sit up. "You fainted. I'm Mrs. Barbara. I was here with my—" The woman hesitated, looking at the girl in denim overalls. "With my granddaughter, Olivia." The name echoed in Thomas's mind like distant thunder. Olivia, a name he had heard before but couldn't remember where. "Daddy, are you sick?" Emily approached, carefully touching his arm. "No, sweetheart, Daddy just got surprised," he replied, unable to take his eyes off Olivia. The girl shyly hid behind her grandmother, but her eyes remained fixed on Emily. It was impossible to deny the connection that seemed to exist between them, as if they were two pieces of a puzzle finally reunited. "Sir, I think we need to talk," said Mrs. Barbara, her voice carrying a gravity that made Thomas's stomach churn. "Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing." "Talk about what?" Thomas asked, though part of him already suspected the answer. Mrs. Barbara looked at the two girls, who had gone back to playing together as if they were long-time friends. "About what your ex-wife never told you, about what she hid from all of us during these 7 years. The mention of Rebecca, his ex-wife, made Thomas straighten up on the bench. Rebecca had disappeared from his life 3 years ago, leaving only divorce papers and a cold letter explaining that she needed to start over somewhere else. "How do you know Rebecca?" he asked, feeling a chill in his stomach. "She is my daughter," Mrs. Barbara replied, the words falling like stones in the silence of the park. "And Olivia is your daughter too, Thomas." The world stopped. The noise of children playing, the wind in the trees, even his own breathing seemed to fall silent. Thomas looked at Olivia, then at Emily, and the truth hit him with devastating force. "That's impossible. Rebecca always said she had no family. She said she was an orphan," he murmured, feeling the ground disappear beneath his feet. "My daughter told many lies, Thomas, and I made the mistake of staying silent for too long," Mrs. Barbara sighed, sitting beside him on the bench. "But when I saw Emily here in the park last week, I knew I couldn't hide the truth any longer." "You know Emily?" "How?" "Olivia comes to play here with me every day. Last week she saw Emily and was fascinated. She said she had found her twin sister. I thought it was just a child's imagination until I saw them together today." Thomas watched the girls playing on the seesaw. They communicated without words, as if sharing a secret language. Each movement of one was mirrored by the other in a natural and unconscious way. "Where is Rebecca now?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "She remarried 2 years ago, to a businessman named Michael Reynolds. They live in a gated community on the other side of town." Mrs. Barbara spoke bitterly. "She forbade any contact with me, said Olivia didn't need to know about the past." "And you accepted that?" "I was a lonely woman, Thomas. When Rebecca showed up at my door with Olivia, she said the father had abandoned you and that she couldn't raise 2 daughters alone. She asked me to take care of one of them temporarily." Thomas felt anger rise in his throat like boiling lava. "She lied. I never abandoned anyone. Rebecca left home one morning and never came back. She left only a letter saying she needed to find herself. I know that now. Mrs. Barbara touched his arm gently. Over these years, I realized how Rebecca manipulated situations, how she twisted the truth to get what she wanted. The puzzle pieces began fitting together in Thomas's mind. Rebecca's sudden rush to separate, the constant fights about money, how she had emotionally distanced herself in the last months before leaving. Why did she do this? Why separate the girls? Mrs. Barbara hesitated, looking at the children who were now drawing something in the sand with sticks. There are things I still don't know, Thomas, but I have my suspicions. Rebecca was always ambitious, always wanted more than she had. When she came to me, she was different, talked about opportunities, about a better future. Do you have a way to contact her? I have the phone number, but she rarely answers. And when she does, she's always aggressive, saying I'm interfering with her new life. Thomas took his cell phone from his pocket with trembling hands. Give me the number. I need to talk to her now. Mrs. Barbara hesitated for a moment, then recited the numbers. Thomas dialed, his heart beating so loud he could hear it in his ears. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Hello? Rebecca's familiar voice made him freeze for a moment. Rebecca, it's me, Thomas. A long silence followed. How did you get my number? What do you want? I want answers. About Olivia. About why you hid from me that we had 2 daughters. The sound of the call ending was like a slap in the face. Thomas looked at the phone in disbelief, then dialed again. This time it went straight to voicemail. She hung up on me, he said to Mrs. Barbara, who shook her head sadly. That was to be expected. Rebecca never liked confrontations when she was wrong. Emily ran up to them, followed closely by Olivia. Daddy, Rafa said you're real sisters. Is it true? She asked with eyes shining with hope. Thomas looked at the 2 girls, his daughters, and felt his chest tighten. How to explain to a 7-year-old that her mother had lied about everything? How to tell her she had a twin sister who was hidden from her whole life? Yes, sweetheart, Olivia is your sister, he said. His voice choked. I knew it. Emily jumped with joy and hugged Olivia. I always dreamed I had a sister just like me. Olivia returned the hug, and they both laughed in the exact same way at the exact same time. Mrs. Barbara wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. They feel the connection, she murmured. Even without knowing the truth, they always knew. What do we do now? Thomas asked, feeling lost. Now you need to fight for your rights as a father, and I'm going to help you. I've kept things that Rebecca left here, documents she thought I wouldn't understand. What kind of documents? Papers about an inheritance she used to mention when she thought I wasn't listening. Phone conversations about money and conditions that needed to be met. Thomas's mind raced. Inheritance? Rebecca had never mentioned anything about a family inheritance. She always said her family had lost everything and that they had no living relatives. Can I see these documents? Of course, but not here. Why don't you come to my house? The girls can play while we talk better. Thomas looked at Emily, who was showing Olivia how to braid the hair of the doll she always carried. Emily, do you want to go to Grandma Barbara's house? Is she my grandma too? Emily asked, looking at Mrs. Barbara with curiosity. Yes, my love, she is your grandma, Thomas confirmed, seeing the woman's face light up. That's great. I always wanted to have a grandma. Emily jumped into Mrs. Barbara's arms, who hugged her emotionally. And I always wanted to meet my granddaughters, Mrs. Barbara whispered, kissing the top of Emily's head. Mrs. Barbara's house was just 3 blocks from the park, on a quiet street of old houses with well-kept gardens. Her house was small but cozy, with walls full of photographs and a backyard where Olivia had her toys scattered. You can play in the backyard, Mrs. Barbara told the girls. I'll prepare a snack for you. Thomas followed her to the kitchen, where she served coffee and put cookies on a plate. The documents are in my bedroom. Let me get them, she said, going up a creaky staircase. Through the kitchen window, Thomas watched the 2 girls playing. It was impossible to tell them apart from a distance. They had the same gestures, the same way of tilting their heads when thinking, even the same way of twisting a strand of hair when they were concentrating. Mrs. Barbara returned carrying a shoebox full of papers. Rebecca left this here when she moved to the new house. She said they were just old documents, but I took a look. She spread the papers on the kitchen table. Thomas examined the documents. There were copies of certificates, some letterhead papers from a law firm, and several handwritten notes by Rebecca. "Look at this," Mrs. Barbara pointed to a yellowed letter. "It's from a lawyer in Chicago, talking about an inheritance from a great-uncle that Rebecca had never mentioned." Thomas read the letter, feeling his stomach churn with each line. The document spoke of a substantial inheritance, but mentioned a specific clause about the number of direct heirs. "The inheritance will be distributed exclusively to direct descendants in a single line," he read aloud. "What does that mean?" "Keep reading." Mrs. Barbara indicated the next paragraph. "To prevent asset dispersion, the inheritance will be granted only to families with a single direct descendant. Families with multiple direct heirs will be excluded from the distribution." Thomas felt his blood run cold. She knew. Rebecca knew that if she had 2 daughters, she would lose the inheritance. "That's what I've suspected for months. When Rebecca brought Olivia to me, she was desperate for money. She talked about opportunities she couldn't miss, about a future that depended on certain conditions being met." Thomas reread the letter, looking for more details. At the end of the document, he found a date that made him shudder. "This letter is from 3 months before Rebecca left me," he murmured. "She planned everything. She separated the girls to get the inheritance." "And now?" Mrs. Barbara asked. "What are you going to do?" Before Thomas could answer, the sound of an argument in the backyard caught his attention. He ran to the window and saw a tall, well-dressed man talking tensely with the girls. "Who is that?" he asked, already running toward the door. "It's Michael, Rebecca's husband," Mrs. Barbara answered, turning pale. "How did he know we're here?" Thomas ran out to the backyard, arriving just in time to hear the man talking to Olivia. "Olivia, your mother is worried. We're going home now," Michael said, holding the girl's hand. "But I want to stay with my sister," Olivia protested, hiding behind Emily. "And who are you?" Thomas stepped between Michael and the girls. "I'm Olivia's stepfather, and you must be the man who's been bothering our family." Michael stared at him with hostility. "I'm her father, her biological father. That doesn't give you any rights. Rebecca has legal custody and a new life. I suggest you don't try to complicate things." The veiled threat in Michael's voice didn't go unnoticed. Thomas took a step forward, but Mrs. Barbara held his arm. "Michael, please. The girls are just playing," she tried to mediate. "Mrs. Barbara, you've already caused enough trouble." Rebecca was clear. She doesn't want any more contact with the past. Michael turned to Olivia. "Come on, Olivia, now. I don't want to go." Olivia started to cry, clinging to Emily. "You can't take her by force," Thomas said, feeling his anger boil. "Yes, I can. I have the adoption and custody papers. Legally, you're nothing but a stranger to her. I'm her father. Prove it." Michael smiled coldly, picking up Olivia despite the girl's protests. Thomas took a step toward him, but stopped when he saw the terror in both girls' eyes. He couldn't make a scene in front of them. "This isn't over," he said through clenched teeth. "I'm counting on it," Michael replied, walking toward a black car parked on the street. "But remember, I have resources you don't. And very good lawyers." "Daddy!" Emily ran to Thomas after Michael left with Olivia. "Why did he take my sister?" Thomas hugged her, feeling his daughter's tears wet his shirt. "Don't worry, sweetheart, Daddy will bring her back." But as he spoke, he watched the black car disappear around the corner, taking with it a part of his family he hadn't even known existed just hours before. Mrs. Barbara approached, also with tears in her eyes. "He can't do that. Olivia is your daughter. Apparently he can." "At least for now," Thomas sighed. "But I will fight. I will fight for both of my daughters." That night, Thomas put Emily to bed after a difficult conversation about sisters, separated families, and promises that everything would be all right. She fell asleep hugging her doll, whispering Olivia's name in her dreams. Thomas spent the night researching online about parental rights, shared custody, and how to prove paternity. Every article he read made him more determined, but also more worried about the legal complexity of the case. The next morning, he called Mr. Robert Johnson, a lawyer he knew from his time working at a construction company. "Thomas, my boy, it's been so long." Robert's warm voice reassured him a little. "Robert, I need help. It's a complicated family case." After telling the whole story, Thomas heard silence on the other end of the line. "This is serious, Thomas, but it's also complex. First, we need to prove paternity officially. Then, challenge the current custody and investigate the circumstances of the separation. How long could that take? Months. Maybe more, depending on the other party's resistance. And there's another problem. If this Michael really has resources, he can make the process very difficult. It doesn't matter. I'll fight for as long as it takes. Then schedule a meeting here at the office. We'll study every document you have and map out a strategy." Thomas hung up the phone feeling more hopeful. At least now he had a plan of action. 2 weeks had passed since the meeting in the park. Thomas took Emily to the same spot every day, hoping to find Olivia again, but she never showed up. Mrs. Barbara mentioned that Michael had forbidden the girl from visiting her grandmother, and that Rebecca had threatened to cut off all contact if there were any more interferences. During this period, Thomas discovered disturbing things about his ex-wife. Robert had hired a private investigator who revealed that Rebecca had planned the divorce long before Thomas imagined. There were records of consultations with family lawyers 6 months before she left home. She knew about the inheritance even before getting pregnant, Robert explained during a meeting at the office, and apparently calculated everything to maximize her gains. "How can someone be so cold?" Thomas wondered aloud. "Money makes people do terrible things, Thomas, especially when there's a lot of money involved." The investigator's report showed that Rebecca's inheritance had been substantial, enough to buy the house in the gated community, an imported car, and even invest in a cosmetics company she had opened with Michael. "We have to prove that she defrauded the inheritance process," Robert said. "If we can prove she lied about having only one daughter, we can challenge the entire will." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. "This could take years," Thomas sighed. "Maybe. But we have one advantage. The girls. Emily can testify about her sister's existence, and Mrs. Barbara can confirm that Rebecca hid Olivia on purpose." While the lawyers worked on the legal case, Thomas faced another challenge, explaining to Emily why her sister no longer came to the park. "Doesn't she like me anymore, Daddy?" Emily asked one afternoon, sitting on the same bench where it all began. "Of course she does, my love. But sometimes adults complicate things. Olivia's mother doesn't want her playing with us right now." "Why? How do you explain greed, manipulation, and fraud to a 7-year-old? "Because she's confused about what's best for Olivia," he finally said. "When will I see my sister again?" "Soon, I promise." But internally, Thomas wasn't sure when or if he could keep that promise. Thomas's life changed completely in the following weeks. As an HVAC technician, his schedule had always been flexible, which made it easier to care for Emily. But now, with legal consultations, meetings with investigators, and the need to work overtime to pay the lawyers, he felt constantly torn. Mrs. Barbara became a constant presence in their lives. She picked Emily up from school on days when Thomas couldn't, made dinners for them, and became the grandmother Emily never had. "She looks so much like Olivia," Mrs. Barbara said one evening, watching Emily play in the living room. "But she has your personality, more determined, more stubborn. And Olivia, what is she like? More sensitive, more reserved. She was always more in tune with emotions. When she was a baby, she cried every time I was sad, as if she could feel my feelings. Rebecca mentioned that when the girls were little. She said Emily was the stronger one, more independent. Maybe that's why she chose to keep Emily and left me Olivia. She knew Emily would adapt better to changes." The conversation was interrupted by the ringing of the phone. Thomas answered, expecting it to be Robert, but the voice on the other end surprised him. "Thomas, this is Ms. Peterson, Emily's teacher." "Ms. Peterson, is something wrong?" "Actually, yes. Today, a little girl showed up at the school gate asking about Emily. A little girl who looked just like her. Thomas's heart raced. Was Olivia at school? Yes. She said she was Emily's sister and really wanted to talk to her. She was with a driver who said he got confused about which school he was supposed to pick the girl up from. What happened? I explained that I couldn't release Emily to go with strangers, but I let them talk for a few minutes in the courtyard. It was touching, Thomas. They hugged as if they had been separated for years, not weeks. And then, the driver separated them and took Olivia away, but not before she gave a drawing to Emily. A drawing? Yes. Emily is right here next to me. Would you like to talk to her? Please. Daddy? Emily's voice came through the phone. Rafa drew me a picture. What's the drawing of, sweetheart? It's the two of us together in a house with you and Grandma Barbara, and there's a lady with black hair who must be her mother, but she's far away from us. Thomas felt a tightness in his chest. Even though she was so young, Olivia already understood the situation better than many adults. Keep that drawing safe, Emily. It's very special. I'll keep it in my room, right next to my bed. When Thomas picked up Emily from school, she ran into his arms holding the drawing as if it were a treasure. Rafa said she misses us, she told him on the way home, and that her new house is very big, but she feels lonely. Did she say anything else? She said the man who lives with her doesn't like it when she talks about me, and that her mother gets sad when she asks about you. Every word from Emily felt like a stab to Thomas's heart. Olivia was clearly suffering, and he felt powerless to help her. That same night, Robert called with news. Thomas, we got something important. The investigator found that Rebecca omitted information in the inheritance process. She declared herself a single mother of one daughter, when in fact she was married and had two. Is that enough to challenge the inheritance? It's a start. But we found something even better. The great-uncle who left the inheritance died before the girls were born. The clause about a single heir was added to the will by a later amendment, made by a law firm that has ties to Michael. Are you saying the inheritance was fraudulent? I'm saying there are very strong indications of fraud, and that changes everything. If we can prove it, not only do you regain custody of Olivia, but Rebecca could face serious criminal problems. Thomas felt a mix of hope and worry. On one hand, there was finally a path to getting his daughter back. On the other, he knew Michael and Rebecca wouldn't give up easily. What do we do now? Now we file an emergency petition for visitation. With the evidence we have, a judge could grant supervised visits while we investigate the larger fraud. How long could that take? If all goes well, a few weeks. If they create obstacles, a few months. Thomas hung up the phone, feeling more hopeful than he had in weeks. For the first time since the meeting in the park, he believed he might actually get both his daughters back. But Michael Reynolds wasn't a man to give up easily. 2 days after Robert's call, Thomas received an unexpected visit at home. Mr. Wilson? A man in a suit introduced himself at the door. I'm a process server. I have a court notification for you. Thomas opened the envelope with trembling hands, reading the contents with growing indignation. Michael was suing him for disturbance and harassment, claiming that Thomas had invaded the family's privacy and caused emotional trauma to Olivia. This is ridiculous, he murmured, rereading the document. The lawsuit included a request for a restraining order, prohibiting Thomas from approaching Olivia, her school, or even the area where they lived. He immediately called Robert. They're trying to silence us, Robert explained, after reading the legal documents over the phone. It's a common tactic when the other side knows they're at a legal disadvantage. They create a parallel lawsuit to muddy the waters. What does that mean for our case? It means they're desperate. People who are confident in their legal position don't make these kinds of aggressive moves. But what if the restraining order gets approved? We'll challenge it, of course, and we'll use it as evidence that they're trying to illegally prevent contact between father and daughter. At the restraining order hearing, Thomas saw Rebecca for the first time in nearly 3 years. She looked different, thinner, wearing expensive clothes, and with a cold expression he didn't recognize. Your Honor, Michael's lawyer addressed the judge. "My client is merely seeking to protect his family from constant harassment. The respondent has been pursuing a minor and causing disruptions to the family routine." Robert stood up to respond. "Your Honor, my client is the biological father of the minor in question, seeking only to exercise his legitimate parental rights. We've submitted DNA test results proving paternity to the court records." The judge flipped through the documents, occasionally looking at Thomas and then at Rebecca. "Mrs. Reynolds," he addressed Rebecca, "do you confirm that this man is the biological father of the minor Olivia?" Rebecca hesitated, looking nervously at her lawyer beside her. "Yes, Your Honor, but he abandoned the family years ago. He has no right to disturb our new life." "With all due respect, Your Honor," Robert intervened, "there's no evidence of abandonment. On the contrary, there's evidence that my client was deceived about the existence of his daughter." "That's ridiculous," Rebecca exploded, rising from her chair. "I don't need to—" "Ma'am, please," the judge interrupted firmly. "Maintain your composure." Rebecca's explosive behavior didn't go unnoticed by anyone in the room. Even her own lawyer seemed uncomfortable. "I'm denying the restraining order due to lack of compelling evidence," the judge decided. "But I'm ordering that any contact between the parties be supervised by a social worker until the custody matter is resolved." It was a small but important victory. Thomas would finally have legal permission to see Olivia. The first supervised visit was scheduled at the park where everything had begun. The social worker, an experienced woman named Jennifer, arrived promptly, followed a few minutes later by Michael and Olivia. "Daddy!" Olivia shouted when she saw Thomas running toward him. The hug between father and daughter was intense and emotional. Thomas felt tears streaming down his face as he held the girl who had been hidden from him for so long. "I missed you so much," she whispered in his ear. "Me too, my daughter. Every single day." Jennifer watched everything carefully, taking discreet notes. Michael stayed at a distance, constantly talking on the phone and looking at his watch impatiently. "Where's Emily?" Olivia asked, looking around. "She's at school, but she'll be here soon. Grandma Barbara is bringing her." "Can Grandma Barbara come here?" "Of course she can. She's missed you very much too." When Mrs. Barbara arrived with Emily, the scene was emotional. The two girls hugged as if they hadn't seen each other for years, and Mrs. Barbara cried openly as she was able to hug Olivia again. "Grandma, I drew you." Olivia showed a paper she had brought in her backpack. "Look, it's all of us together." The drawing showed the two girls holding hands, surrounded by Thomas and Mrs. Barbara. Rebecca appeared as a small distant figure in the corner of the paper. Jennifer approached to see the drawing, talking gently with the girls. "Olivia, can you tell me how you feel about having a sister?" she asked. "I feel complete," Olivia answered without hesitation. "Like a part of me that was missing has returned. And you, Emily? I always knew I had a sister. In my dreams, I used to play with a girl just like me. When I saw Olivia, I knew it was her." The girls' answers clearly impressed Jennifer, who continued asking questions about their feelings and desires. "If you could choose, where would you like to live?" she asked. "Together," both answered at the same time, then laughed at their synchronization. "With Dad and Grandma Barbara," Emily added. "And your mother?" Jennifer asked Olivia. The girl hesitated, looking toward Michael before answering. "Mom is always busy with work, and Uncle Michael doesn't like it when I talk about my real family." Michael heard the comment and approached, clearly irritated. "Olivia, you know that's not true," he said with a tense voice. "But it is," she insisted. "You said I couldn't talk about Dad or about Emily." Jennifer took more notes, and Thomas could see that Michael was getting increasingly nervous. "I think that's enough time," Michael declared, looking at his watch. "Olivia has commitments." "Actually, we still have an hour," Jennifer corrected, consulting her own schedule. "I have authority over my stepdaughter's schedule," Michael replied arrogantly. "Mr. Reynolds, during supervised visits, I have authority over the schedule," Jennifer firmly countered. "And the girls still have time together." The tension between Michael and the social worker was palpable. Thomas noticed that Michael wasn't used to being contradicted, especially by a woman. During the last 30 minutes of the visit, the girls played while the adults talked. Jennifer asked Thomas several questions about his routine, work, and plans for the future. "Mr. Wilson, how do you plan to care for 2 children while working as a technician?" she asked. I have Mrs. Barbara's support, who is the girl's grandmother. Besides, I'm willing to adjust my schedule or even change jobs if necessary. And financially? We're not rich, but we have enough, and I can work overtime when needed. Jennifer nodded, taking more notes. When it was time to leave, Olivia clung to Thomas. I don't want to go, Daddy. I want to stay with you and Emily. I know, my dear, but for now you need to go. But we'll see each other again soon, I promise. When? Next week, and every week after that. Michael approached to take Olivia, but she hid behind Thomas. Olivia, let's go, Michael said impatiently. I don't want to go with you, she replied, holding tighter to her father. Jennifer intervened. Olivia, for now you need to go with Uncle Michael, but your father is right, you'll see each other every week. Very reluctantly, Olivia let go of Thomas and walked toward Michael. But before leaving, she ran back and whispered something in Emily's ear. What did she say? Thomas asked as they were leaving. She said she has a secret to tell me next week, Emily answered. A secret about her mother. Thomas felt a chill in his stomach. What secret could a 7-year-old child have about her own mother? 1 week later, during the second supervised visit, Olivia pulled Emily to a corner of the park where they could talk more privately. Jennifer kept her distance, allowing the girls privacy, but stayed close enough to intervene if necessary. Emily, Olivia whispered, I heard Mum talking on the phone. Saying what? She was angry with someone, said she couldn't lose the money, that she had done everything right. Emily looked at her father, who was talking with Mrs. Barbara near the bench. What else did you hear? She said that if anyone found out about you, she could go to jail, and that Uncle Michael was worried about the fake papers. Even though she was a child, Emily understood that this was important. She discreetly called Thomas. Daddy, you need to hear what Olivia overheard. Thomas approached, and Olivia repeated what she had told her sister. Jennifer also came closer when she noticed the seriousness of the conversation. Olivia, are you sure you heard that? Jennifer asked gently. Yes, I am. Mommy didn't know I was listening. She was in her office and I was playing in the hallway. Did she mention what kind of papers? Papers from the man who gave her money. She said she changed some things so she wouldn't lose the inheritance. Jennifer looked at Thomas with a meaningful expression. Mr. Wilson, I suggest you pass this information to your lawyer immediately. That same afternoon, Thomas called Robert and told him everything Olivia had overheard. This is exactly what we needed, Robert said excitedly, a direct confession to document fraud. But it's just a child's testimony. Yes, but it's enough to get a search and seizure warrant for Rebecca's documents. If she really confessed to altering papers, we can find physical evidence. How long will this take? I'll file the request tomorrow. With luck, we'll have the warrant by the end of the week. But Rebecca and Michael didn't just sit still. 2 days later, Jennifer called Thomas with worrying news. Mr. Wilson, I need to inform you that the Reynolds family has filed a request to move cities. They want to move to Miami, citing work opportunities. Can they do that during a custody process? Technically, yes, especially if they claim professional necessity. But it's also clearly an attempt to complicate the process. What can I do? Your lawyer can request a preliminary injunction preventing the move until the case is resolved, but it needs to be quick. Robert immediately filed for the preliminary injunction, but the process would only be reviewed the following week. Thomas spent days in agony, imagining Rebecca running away with Olivia to another state. At the injunction hearing, the judge heard both sides. Your Honor, Michael's lawyer argued, my client received an irresistible job offer in Miami. He cannot be professionally penalized because of past family disputes. Your Honor, Robert countered, this sudden move is clearly an attempt to frustrate the custody process. Moreover, we have evidence of document fraud that is being investigated. What evidence? The judge asked. Robert presented Olivia's testimony and the questionable inheritance documents. A 7-year-old child, Your Honor, Michael's lawyer dismissed. Childish imagination does not constitute legal evidence. Even so, the judge decided, until the fraud investigations are completed, the minor Olivia Wilson is prohibited from moving residences outside this court's jurisdiction. It was another small but crucial victory. Olivia would remain in Chicago. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. That same week, the search and seizure warrant was issued. Thomas accompanied Robert and the officers to Rebecca's house in the gated community. The house was truly impressive. 2 stories, a well-kept garden, and 3 cars in the garage. It was evident the inheritance had provided a very high standard of living. Rebecca answered the door with an unfriendly face. "This is absurd," she shouted upon seeing the warrant. "You have no right to invade my home." "Ma'am, this is a court order," the officer explained patiently. "We have authorization to seize specific documents related to your great-uncle's inheritance." Michael appeared behind Rebecca, clearly nervous. "Our lawyer will challenge this in court," he threatened. "That's your right," Robert responded calmly. "But for now we'll carry out the order." The search lasted 3 hours. The officers found stacks of documents in Rebecca's office, including several versions of the great-uncle's will, some with handwritten changes. More importantly, they found a file with copies of birth certificates, an original for Olivia, and a fake one that omitted any mention of twins. "This is very serious," Robert murmured to Thomas as they watched the documents being sealed in evidence bags. "Enough for the case?" "Enough for much more than that. Rebecca may face criminal charges for document forgery and fraud." In the middle of the search, Olivia appeared at the top of the stairs, watching everything with wide eyes. "Daddy," she called, running down the stairs. Thomas picked her up, kissing her face. "Hi, my daughter. How are you?" "I want to go with you," she whispered in his ear. "Please, take me away from here." Thomas's heart broke, hearing the desperation in his daughter's voice. "Soon, my love. Very soon." Rebecca approached, trying to take Olivia from Thomas's arms. "She stays here," she said coldly. "For now," Thomas replied, reluctantly handing Olivia to her mother. "But this will change very soon." The look Rebecca gave him was pure hatred, but there was something else too, fear. 2 weeks later, Robert called with the news Thomas had been waiting for. "Thomas, we have everything we need. The seized documents prove fraud on multiple levels. Rebecca not only altered certificates but also tampered with the original will." "What does that mean?" "It means you'll get custody of both girls, and it also means Rebecca will face serious criminal consequences." "When?" "The final hearing is scheduled for next Friday. If everything goes as we hope, you can take Olivia home the same day." Thomas barely slept in the days leading up to the hearing. Mrs. Barbara spent Thursday night at his house, helping prepare the room that would be Olivia's. "I think she'll like these drawings on the wall," Mrs. Barbara said, hanging some watercolor flowers she had bought. "Are you sure this will work?" Thomas asked for the 10th time. "Thomas, you're a good father. Rebecca committed crimes to separate a family. Any sensible judge will see that." Emily was more excited than Thomas had ever seen her. "Daddy, tomorrow Rafa comes home forever?" she asked during dinner. "If all goes well, yes. I set aside half of my toys for her, and I'll teach her how to braid hair the way Grandma taught me." Emily's innocence and hope only increased the pressure Thomas felt. What if something went wrong? How to explain to a 7-year-old girl that her sister couldn't come home after all? On the morning of the final hearing, the courtroom was full. Besides the families involved and their lawyers, there was also a public prosecutor investigating the criminal charges against Rebecca. Jennifer, the social worker, was the first to testify. "Your Honor, in my professional assessment, it's clear that the girls have an exceptional bond and that the separation has caused unnecessary suffering for both," she reported. "Furthermore, I've observed that Olivia shows signs of emotional stress in her current environment, while appearing relaxed and happy during visits with her father and sister." "What signs of stress?" the judge asked. "Insomnia, recurring nightmares, and regressive behavior." She also repeatedly expressed the desire to live with her father and sister. Michael's lawyer tried to object. "Your Honor, every child goes through adjustment periods. This doesn't mean the current environment is inadequate. Actually," Jennifer continued, "during my visits to the Reynolds household, I observed constant tension between the adults, frequent discussions about legal matters in the child's presence, and a tendency to use the child as a tool for emotional manipulation." This last observation clearly bothered both Rebecca and Michael. Then Robert presented all the evidence of fraud, the altered documents, the fake certificates, and the legally obtained phone call recordings. "Your Honor," Robert argued, "this isn't just a contested custody case. It's a case of elaborate and continued fraud, where a mother deliberately separated twin daughters for personal financial benefit." The prosecutor then presented their own investigation. "Your Honor, the District Attorney's Office has concluded there were crimes of falsifying public documents, inheritance fraud, and material abandonment of a minor. We are recommending the defendant face criminal charges for all these offenses." Rebecca visibly paled upon hearing the list of charges. When it was her turn to speak, she tried to justify herself. "Your Honor, I was only trying to secure a better future for my daughter. I didn't know I was doing anything wrong." "Mrs. Reynolds," the judge replied dryly, "falsifying official documents and depriving a child of contact with her father aren't innocent mistakes. They're deliberate crimes." "But I can support Olivia better than he can," she protested, pointing at Thomas. "I have a bigger house, more money." "Money obtained through fraud isn't a valid argument for custody," the judge replied. Michael tried to intervene. "Your Honor, I can continue supporting Olivia even if my wife faces legal troubles." "Mr. Reynolds, you're also under investigation for complicity in fraud. Documents seized from your home show your signature on several fraudulent papers." Michael fell silent, clearly realizing he had incriminated himself. Finally, the judge addressed Thomas directly. "Mr. Wilson, do you have the financial and emotional means to care for 2 children?" "Yes, Your Honor. I may not have a big house or expensive cars, but I have love, dedication, and the support of the girl's maternal grandmother. Furthermore, I have stable employment and a community support network." "And your plans for the girl's future?" "I want them to grow up together, to know their true story, and to never again be separated by selfish interests. I want them to have a normal life with genuine love." The judge withdrew to deliberate. The 45 minutes that followed were the longest of Thomas's life. When the judge returned, his expression was serious. "Having analyzed all presented evidence, including the social worker's reports, the proof of document fraud, and considering the best interests of the minors involved, I rule, first, full custody of the minors, Emily Wilson and Olivia Wilson, is granted to their biological father, Thomas Wilson, with supervised visitation rights for the biological mother once her legal situation is resolved. Second, the fraudulent documents are nullified, and I order that the inheritance be reassessed considering the existence of 2 legitimate heirs. Third, I refer the case to the District Attorney's Office for pursuing criminal charges against Rebecca Wilson Reynolds and Michael Reynolds." The relief Thomas felt was so intense, he had to lean on the table to avoid fainting. Robert embraced him, whispering, "We did it," in his ear. On the other side of the room, Rebecca was crying desperately while Michael Reynolds was speaking tensely with his lawyer. "Your Honor," Michael's lawyer requested, "we ask for time to appeal." "Granted, but the custody decision takes effect immediately. The minor Olivia can go home with her father today." Jennifer approached Thomas Wilson. "Mr. Wilson, I'll pick up Olivia from school and bring her here. You can take her home within an hour." Thomas could hardly believe that finally, after months of fighting, he would have both his daughters at home. When Jennifer arrived with Olivia, the girl ran into Thomas's arms without looking back. "Daddy, can I go home with you now?" she asked, her eyes shining with hope. "Yes, my daughter, forever." "And will I live with Emily?" "Yes, and with Grandma Barbara too." Olivia looked at Rebecca, who was still crying in a corner of the room. "Can I visit Mommy sometimes?" she asked with the typical kindness of a child. "Of course you can, when she's better." "So are we going home?" Olivia smiled. "We're going home," Thomas confirmed, picking her up. The exit from the courtroom was emotional. Mrs. Barbara was waiting outside with Emily, who had skipped school to be present when her sister could finally come home. "Rafa!" Emily shouted, running to hug her sister. "Emily!" Olivia replied with equal enthusiasm. The two hugged so tightly that Thomas had to laugh through his tears. "There," he said, placing a hand on each girl's head. "Now we're a complete family." On the way home, the girls chattered non-stop in the back seat of the car. planning everything they would do together. Mrs. Barbara, sitting in the passenger seat, was also crying with happiness. "You know, Thomas," she said, "my daughter may have done many wrong things, but at least she gave me 2 wonderful granddaughters." "And now they'll grow up knowing true love," Thomas replied. The house, which had always seemed small to Thomas, now seemed perfect. Emily showed Olivia every corner of the house, including the room they would share. "Look, Rafa," Emily pointed to one of the beds. "This is your bed, and Grandma hung beautiful drawings on the wall." Olivia examined everything carefully, touching the furniture as if she wanted to make sure everything was real. "It's very different from the big house," she said finally, "but it's much better. Here I feel at home." That first night, Thomas had to read 3 bedtime stories because the girls couldn't decide between their favorite books. Finally, they fell asleep, holding hands, as if they were afraid someone might separate them again during the night. Thomas stood in the bedroom doorway for a long time, just watching his 2 daughters sleep. After so many months of fighting, uncertainty, and sleepless nights worrying, he could finally relax. But the legal battle wasn't completely over yet. In the following weeks, Rebecca and Michael Reynolds tried to appeal the decision, but without success. The fraud crimes were too evident, and the testimonies of the girls themselves were too convincing. 3 months after the trial, Rebecca was sentenced to 2 years of semi-open prison and restitution of the defrauded inheritance funds. Michael, as an accomplice, received 6 months in prison and a heavy fine, but for Thomas and the girls, these legal developments were secondary. They were busy building a new life together. Olivia adapted to her new school quickly, especially after she found out she was in the same class as Emily. The teachers had fun trying to tell them apart in the first days, until they developed tricks to identify each one. "Emily is more talkative," Ms. Peterson explained to Thomas during a meeting, "and Olivia is more observant, but academically they're equally brilliant." The inheritance, after being re-evaluated considering 2 heirs, resulted in a sum sufficient for Thomas to buy a larger house and still invest in the girls' education. But he insisted on keeping life simple, without ostentation. "Money is good for providing security," he explained to Mrs. Barbara, "but I don't want the girls growing up thinking it's the most important thing in life." Mrs. Barbara, who had moved into a small house on the same street, became a constant and beloved presence in the girls' lives. She would pick them up from school, help with homework, and tell stories about the family they had never known. "You have a great-grandmother who lived in the countryside," she told them one night during dinner. "She made the best milk sweets in the region. I'll teach you how to make them, too." "Mommy never talked about the family," Olivia commented thoughtfully. "Your mother had past resentments," Mrs. Barbara explained gently. "Sometimes people make poor choices when they're hurt." Thomas appreciated how Mrs. Barbara spoke about Rebecca. Despite all that had happened, she never spoke ill of her daughter in front of the girls. 6 months after the trial, Rebecca asked to see her daughters. She had served half her sentence and was participating in rehabilitation programs in prison. "I don't know if it's a good idea," Thomas confessed to Robert. "She has the legal right to supervised visits, and it might be good for the girls to have closure. What if she tries to manipulate them again? That's why the visits are supervised. Jennifer will be present, and any sign of inappropriate behavior can result in the suspension of visits." Thomas talked with the girls about the possibility of visiting their mother. "I want to see Mommy," Olivia said, after thinking for a moment, "but I don't want to live with her again." "And you, Emily?" "I want to meet her, but I'm afraid she might try to separate us again." "That will never happen again," Thomas assured them. "You are my daughters, and we'll always stay together." The first visit happened at the rehabilitation center where Rebecca was serving her sentence. It was a clean and organized environment, but still clearly institutional. Rebecca looked different, thinner, without makeup, wearing simple clothes. When she saw the girls, she began to cry. "My daughters," she whispered, kneeling to hug them. The girls returned the hug, but Thomas could see reservation in their gestures. "How are you?" Rebecca asked, drying her tears. "We're fine, Mommy," Olivia answered. "We like our new school, and Grandma Barbara teaches us how to cook, and I learned to ride a bike." Emily added. Daddy ran after me in the park until I could do it by myself. Thomas watched Rebecca's expression as the girls talked about their new life. There was sadness, but also something he didn't expect, relief. You seem happy, she finally said. We are, both answered. And do you forgive me for doing wrong things? The girls looked at each other before answering. We forgive you, Mommy, Olivia said, but we don't understand why you separated us. Rebecca looked at Jennifer, then at Thomas, as if asking permission to explain. You can tell them the truth, Thomas said. They're smart enough to understand. Mommy made a very bad choice, Rebecca began. I thought money was more important than family, and I hurt you because of that. But are you sorry now? Emily asked. Very sorry. If I could turn back time, I would do everything differently. The visits continued monthly. Over time, Rebecca seemed to genuinely accept that she had lost her daughters through her own choices. She began focusing on rebuilding a relationship based on love, not possession. She's different, Olivia commented after one of the visits. Sadder, but also more genuine. People can change, Thomas explained. Sometimes you have to lose everything to understand what truly matters. 2 years after that fateful day in the park, Thomas's life was completely different. The girls had grown up and become even closer, if possible. They developed their own distinct personalities, but maintained the special connection they'd always had. Emily became more outgoing and adventurous, always leading the games and making new friends. Olivia developed a love for reading and art, spending hours drawing the family she had found. Mrs. Barbara, now 68 years old, was more active and happier than she had been in decades. Taking care of her granddaughters had given her a new purpose in life. You know, she told the girls one Sunday afternoon, you saved me just as much as your daddy saved you. What do you mean, Grandma? Emily asked. I was very lonely before you came along. Now, I have a real family. Thomas, watching from the kitchen where he was preparing lunch, smiled. His life wasn't perfect. They still faced occasional financial challenges, and the girls sometimes fought like any sisters. But it was a life built on true love and honesty. On the 3rd anniversary of the day they reunited in the park, Thomas took the family back to the place where it all began. The girls, now 10 years old, ran to the same seesaw where they had played that first day. Remember when you fainted, Daddy? Emily laughed, swinging on the seesaw with Olivia. How could I forget? It was the most confusing and happiest day of my life. Why confusing? Olivia asked. Because I didn't understand how it was possible to have 2 identical daughters. But it was happy because I finally found you both. Mrs. Barbara sat on the same bench where she had comforted Thomas that first day. If someone had told me 3 years ago that I'd have 2 granddaughters living with me, I would have said it was impossible, she reflected. And if someone told me I'd discover I have a twin sister, I would have thought that was impossible too, Olivia added. Sometimes the best things in life happen when we least expect them, Thomas concluded. They spent the whole afternoon in the park, playing, having a picnic, and simply enjoying family life. Other families played nearby, children ran and shouted, and Thomas thought about how that normal, everyday scene was actually a miracle for them. When the sun began to set, they prepared to leave. The girls ran ahead arguing about which movie they would watch that night, while Thomas and Mrs. Barbara walked more slowly. You know, Mrs. Barbara said, I've always believed things happen for a reason. What would be the reason for everything we've been through? So you would learn the true value of family. So the girls would grow up knowing that true love overcomes any difficulty. Thomas looked at his daughters running ahead, holding hands as they always did, and knew Mrs. Barbara was right. That night, while tucking the girls into bed, Olivia asked a question that surprised him. Daddy, are you happy that Mommy did wrong things? What do you mean? If she hadn't done wrong things, I wouldn't have come to live here, and maybe I never would have really known you and Emily. Thomas thought for a moment before answering. I'm not happy that your mother suffered or that she made poor choices, but I am happy that in the end, everything worked out for our family. Me too, Emily said sleepily from the next bed. Now we're complete. Yes, Thomas agreed, kissing each one's forehead. Now we are complete. As he went downstairs after checking that the girls were sleeping, Thomas reflected on the journey that had brought them there. It had been painful, complicated, and sometimes seemed impossible, but every obstacle had been worth it. He sat in the living room, looking at the photos that now covered the walls. Photos of the girls together at school, birthdays celebrated as a family, simple trips to the beach, everyday moments that were precious precisely because they were ordinary. On a side table, there was a drawing that Olivia had made the previous week. It showed a small house with 4 figures in front, a man, 2 identical girls, and an older woman, all smiling, all holding hands. On the back of the drawing, she had written in her careful handwriting, "My real family." Thomas smiled, carefully putting the drawing away. Tomorrow would be another normal day: school, work, homework, family dinner. Exactly the kind of normalcy he had dreamed of during all those difficult months. Upstairs, he could hear the girls whispering before falling asleep as they did every night, probably planning some mischief for the next day, or just sharing the thoughts that only twin sisters can share. His phone rang and he saw it was a message from Robert. "Saw in the paper that Michael was released last week. Everything okay over there?" Thomas typed back, "Everything's perfect. We are a family. There's nothing that can change that now." And it was true. No matter what the future brought, the challenges they might still face or the complications life could present, they had found something no outside force could destroy: the true love of a family united by truth, not by convenience. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this touching story about family, truth, and the strength of genuine love. Do you believe Thomas made the right decisions? How did you feel about the journey of these twin girls? Leave your honest opinion in the comments. We love reading every single one, and if this story touched your heart, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other stories that celebrate life's most important values.